Hey gang, Kit here. Just wanted to give a quick content warning before we start. We do mention suicide in the latter half of the podcast. Not in any huge detail, but it is mentioned. Lowie does give a heads up immediately beforehand. We'll put the timestamp into the episode description as well as links to places you can access support. Stay safe, queer fam. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Bristol 24/7 Queer Catch-Up. My name is Kit and my pronouns are they, them and theirs.
My name is Lowie and my pronouns are they, them and theirs.
We're going to be diving headfirst into the biggest queer stories, but first, here's the rundown. A Freedom of Information request has revealed that the Laurel's Gender Identity Clinic in Exeter assessed only 2 new patients in the past 12 months, one of whom had been waiting almost 6 years for an appointment. The NHS Trust in charge of the clinic says they have been focusing their resources on patients who had already started treatment with them, despite having a waiting list of 2,592 people. Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch has been heavily criticised for her vague remarks during a parliamentary debate on conversion therapy legislation. The minister has been denounced by MPs from both her own and opposing parties for failing to provide a timeline for advancing a ban on conversion therapy, as well as her allusions to potential exemptions for faith groups. James Morton has become the third advisor to quit the government's LGBT advisory panel amid claims of hostility towards LGBTQ people. In a damning resignation letter, Morton said that recent events have left him with no confidence that the UK government wishes to protect the existing quality of life and human rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans people. Singer Jess Glynn has caused outrage after using a transphobic slur during an interview on the Mo Gilligan podcast. Although she has since apologised, Glynn continues to face backlash for her casual use of the slur in the now removed interview. That's the news. You're up to date. Hey gang, it's good to be back. It's really good to be back. I hope you all sort of enjoyed last week and us chatting to Jamie. That was a really cool thing to be able to do. We've got some really cool stuff lined up for this week, but before we get cracking, we've got a little bit of a PSA, I think.
Yeah, I'd call it that.
Yeah.
So, 2021 is census year, which happens every 10 years, and it's a really great chance for everyone to sort of record where they're living, what they do, their general situation and who they are. And this time is the first time that people can record their gender identity as well as their sex assigned at birth. So not only is it super important for queer people to fill it in anyway, there was obviously, a bit to fill in about your sexual orientation, but for trans people especially, it's really important to fill it in this year because it's going to help to get, more recognition of like how many trans people there actually are in the UK. And results from the census go into funding local projects and local authorities, and so it will be a really good chance to go like, hey, there's actually trans people in this area and we should give more money to support queer and trans people. And also, if you're living at home and you're over 16 but you're filling in the census with your family and you're not necessarily out, what you can do, just Google census individual access code and you can get sent a code that allows you to separately fill out your part of the census, which will then override anything you already put in with a family as you're filling it in. So there's also an opportunity there to, like, if you're not out, as queer, or you're not out in your gender identity, you can also, if you're over 16, go on to, like I said, Google census individual access code, and it will give you a code to override it. You can do that without anyone knowing. It doesn't tell anyone. So super important to do, and it'll be really exciting stuff to maybe have like a more accurate representation of how many queer and trans people there are in the UK.
Yeah, because the numbers we have at the moment are really just best guesses, and they are, very, very vague. So, it is really, really super important, and also, particularly in light of the way the government has recently responded to sort of trans rights and rolling back certain laws and rolling back certain rights and protections and promises they've made, having this really accurate number where it's impossible for them to deny the amount of trans people in this country, it's a very valuable thing. Also, as part of it, Lowie and I have both already filled ours out. It says do you identify as the gender assigned at birth? You can tick no on that. But it also asks you in more detail what your gender identity is. So there's just a little fill-in box where you can put the term that describes you best. I personally just wrote non-binary. And I think for non-binary people, this is a really cool opportunity because as vague as the numbers about trans people are, the numbers about non-binary people sort of within that are even more sort of loose. So being able to sort of really like clearly define your gender identity on this is a really important thing, and just it's really super important for queer people to fill it out. And we wanted to really get the message out there that, again, if you're not in a situation where it's comfortable or safe for you to out yourself on the census with your family, you can get this individual access code, because again, it's really, really important for the government to know, we're here, we're queer. Yeah. And all of this. Right. Yeah. Awesome. PSA over.
Yes, we're done lecturing you now.
Right. So I guess let's get into our first story. So the first story we want to talk about is a really awesome piece that Lowie wrote. Lowie writes a lot of awesome things. It's about a photography project called LGBTQ plus Faces of Bristol, where Karen Freer, is that how you pronounce her last name?
Yes.
Freer, yeah. Karen Freer. She's taking free portraits of queer people in Bristol and sharing them to Instagram with people sort of talking about their stories. And it's a really beautiful thing that she's doing. And it's a really lovely thing to just realise the extent to which queer people are doing awesome things in Bristol.
Yeah, it was, just lovely to write about. And also on the, Lowie writes a lot of great things. I realised, I was going to do, a sarcastic hair flip. And, my hair is almost long enough. And, I have short hair. So that's the stage we're at in lockdown 3, guys. Yeah, no, it's just super lovely. And I think it's just a really lovely addition. So there's already Nikki Ebarge's Nikki Takes Photos, trans photography project. And then to also have one of just, generally the queer community is just awesome. And it's really exciting as well because Karen's received a micro grant from the Voice and Influence panel, and is either going to use that to put on an exhibition or is going to see if they can team up with someone to put it on. And if she does, then we'll be using that £250 to create a photo book of all that she's photographed. So yeah, it's just really lovely and wholesome, and I think a project like this is so important because Karen said, in the article and also on her website that there are parts of Bristol where she doesn't feel safe holding her wife's hand, and projects like this and, generally queerness in the media and, just in everyday life is part of it's a first step to making places safer, having visibility and being unashamed of being queer, is just, it's a small step into making cities and other places safer for LGBTQ plus people.
I think 100% you're right about that, and the fact that there are places in a city which is considered one of the most open and accepting cities in the country, the fact that there are still places where queer people don't feel safe is really shocking and really horrifying. And also, in terms of we're talking about queer visibility, I think this is something, so for you and I, where we're non-binary, we're kind of a minority within a minority in terms of, within the trans sort of, and being able to talk about sort of stories within, within things, people being able to really proudly, show off their queerness. And also, I think this is something maybe, like, as trans people, we would understand. Not feeling great in your body, like, not feeling your body matches your gender identity, is a really, really difficult thing. And I really hope for people, and I'm sure for a lot of the people, a lot of sort of the trans people within this, who are having, you know, these really lovely portraits done, having a portrait taken of themselves by a professional photographer. And by the way, like, these are beautiful photos, I have to say. Like, these photos are gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
Having a really gorgeous photo of yourself dressed in a way and presenting in a way that you're like, I feel like this is me, this represents me. That's such a valuable tool for, particularly for trans people, I think for all queer people, but particularly for, you know, people under the trans umbrella, having, you know, visual sort of evidence of yourself being like, yeah, this is me. Especially where, I mean, I'm sure you've had the weird moment of looking back at old pictures of yourself. Like, you'll see pictures of yourself from, like, your early teens and be like, whoa, okay. Like,
yeah,
you know.
they were queer.
and realising, like, oh, I was really trying to present as, you know, as not queer, and I was really, like, looking at old pictures of yourself and going, I remember crying in the mirror before that event going, I look like a boy, even though I was wearing a push-up bra which I really didn't need even then. Like, crying in the mirror being like, I look like a boy. Not realising what it was I felt like a boy.
Right.
You know, you having photos of yourself, portraits of yourself, looking and feeling good in your body is such a valuable thing.
Yeah.
And again, the fact that Karen got this, like, micro grant to do that is a really cool thing. It's a really, really cool thing. And I hope that it's a project that continues. Yeah. I really do.
Yeah, I just think it's incredible to have, like, a project by queer people for queer people.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think I've said this briefly in the past, like, having that queer joy and, like, having it as a tool to, you know, increase visibility. And I obviously don't know most of the queer people living in Bristol, but to see all these people and to hear their stories, whether some of them are, like, really in depth and beautiful, some of them are just, like, one-liners, like, you know, I like anime kind of vibes, and, like, both of them are just like, yeah, also these queer people are beautiful and these photos are beautiful, and also they've got these beautiful, wonderful stories that some of them are in depth and you know, tell their journeys, and then some of them are just really funny. And to see all those sides of queer people, because I know, like, obviously queerness is a massive part of our identities, but to also have that opportunity to be like, yeah, I'm here and I'm queer, and also there's these other things about me, or being like, yeah, I'm here and I'm queer and this is how I got here, like, having that opportunity to express yourself in whatever way through a visual medium, and then also through that interview that's being done. Yeah, I just think, it's just a really beautiful thing, and, like, I just cannot go over how beautiful these photos are either.
Yeah.
Like,
seriously.
They're done on 35mm film.
Oh, wow.
They're just beautiful. Yeah, all done on film. It's awesome.
Like I say, they're really, really beautiful, and just telling all these stories is really awesome. Karen's going to be working with Out Stories as well, which is sort of a collective we've spoken about before, that sort of collects, like, social history of, like, queer people in and around Bristol. So it's really cool that Karen's going to be, you know, sort of working with them and accompanying, you know, these stories and adding to this sort of queer history for sort of future generations and things. And I just think it's a wonderful thing. I mean, you and I both have sort of dabbled in photography and things, sort of in our younger years, which feels like a weird thing to say when you're 24, but, you know, sort of dabble with photography, and it is a really powerful thing. It is a really powerful thing and a really beautiful thing. There's this photography festival that's going to be coming up, just a general photography festival that's going to be coming up. Remind me when that is?
It starts in May, Bristol Photo Festival. Yeah, and that'll be really, really cool. I'm excited about that. So Bristol24 are media partners, which is super exciting, because I get I'm leading, like, on the little partnership, so it means I get all, like, the news first.
Ooh, lovely.
Which is super exciting. Also, yeah, it just looks to be super, super fun. It's got, like, it's all of, like, the major, like, galleries and institutions in the city are going to be taking part. And also, like, they've just done some really cool stuff with the queer community as well, just like on the side. So they've, like, the Bristol Photo Festival have collaborated with the University of Bristol's Brigstow Institute. That was a lot of B's in one sentence. And to create like a piece of research of looking at people in the HIV and AIDS community, their like living spaces and how that's curated, and especially in like a time of lockdown, and how that is created to be a space for that person and to show themselves. It's just so cool. There's just so much good photography, and I think like photography is such a sick way of like being like open and proud, and like having that, it's that thing of like recording history, right? Like it's always, we've said this before, like having ordinary people have their lives documented, and it's that, and it's queer ordinary people with like these extraordinary stories that get to like have their moment of history recorded.
And I think again, especially where we are all in a weird situation right now, and we have been for a year now, I think efforts to really capture this moment in history is particularly valuable. I think that's something that a lot of people are doing more generally, but doing that particularly with queer stories and like, you know, how queer people have trying to really capture these like tiny little kind of bubbles of history within really big things. I think it will be something that is incredibly valuable. And the fact that there is, you know, these sort of things. Do we know of anything else that's like particularly queer going on with the photography festival?
I don't at the moment, but you know, I'll be the first to know. So I keep my ear to the ground. Yeah, but like generally, like obviously, like this is very much more grassroots thing, LGBTQ plus spaces of Bristol, but like also the way that they're working with Out Stories, which has done such amazing work for the city, and also like they're reaching out to older queer people, Kiki Bristol, the city's group for queer and intersex people of colour, you know, making sure that every single group is represented, and like making an active effort to like learn and educate, and make sure it's not just one particular, you know, that sort of form of queerness that can often be represented in the media of like, you know, slim, white, you know, if it's a non-binary or trans person, like a very androgynous, like, you know, it's not that, it's like every queer person is really, really valid and deserves to be documented in this way.
100%. You know, there is this sort of, when people think, you know, oh, you know, queer people or this sort of thing, you know, you picture a slim white cis gay man quite often, and the fact that, you know, there are, you know, disabled people in the queer community, and you know, there are disabled people in the queer community, there are people of colour within the queer community, there are older people in the queer community, you know, there are people, you know, trans and non-binary people who don't present with, you know, androgyny or, you know, and it's, I think the collaboration in this is a really, really important thing.
Yes.
And something that Karen really deserves, you know, really sort of deserves praise for is, you know, how far she's gone to really make this inclusive. That's definitely something that, you know, she deserves some sort of, you know, props for on this one.
I also just love the sort of quote that's at the end of the article saying like, in 2020 I was just getting started, in 2021 we're expanding, increasing representation further. And I just really love that. And if you just like type in like LGBTQ plus spaces of Bristol, the links on the article, there's like a form you can fill out on the website, so like, you know, if you're get yourself represented, you know, and also I think Karen is still looking for volunteers, so you know, if you want to get involved, you can like get involved with like creating this like history. Should be really good. I'm just looking forward to it. And also, as a side note, I'm having my portraits taken in May by Karen. Nice. So excited about it. My main concern is like actually having to re-dye my hair, because there's some roots, and I'm just like, I'm not pulling off Billie Eilish, you know. I wish I was, but
we all wish we were pulling off Billie Eilish. Like, let's be honest, that's who we all kind of want to be.
I'm just kind of giving off like lockdown 3 hasn't had access to, you know, any decent hair bleach in many months. But that's fine, we'll rock it.
Nail it. You got this. So, we have a really special guest with us today. I think it's going to be best if our lovely guests introduce themselves to tell you a little bit more about, who you are and what you do. I think best in your own words. Jack, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Oh, I wish you could see my face. I'm already smiling at the lovely intro. So my name's Jack. I use they and them pronouns. And I'm here today to talk with you about mental health. So I am a project worker with an organisation in Bristol called Changes Bristol. And we're a peer support mental health organisation. So we're a community-based grassroots organisation run by people with lived experience of mental health difficulties for people with mental health difficulties. And yeah, we're here to talk about queer mental health because we have opened up an LGBTQ plus group. And yeah, just kind of wanted to talk about LGBTQ plus mental health.
Yeah. Queer mental health, and I mean, I think that's something that's something that is sort of a particular thing for the queer community and a particular thing for the queer community right now. So, I mean, I guess the first question I really sort of want to ask you, Jack, is you're saying particularly that like Changes Bristol is, and sort of the queer mental health thing is peer support based. Could you kind of just explain a little bit more about what, peer support more generally kind of is, how that works?
Excellent question. And I guess it's probably quite an unusual setup for mental health services because we're used to kind of entering these spaces where people kind of make decisions about us and make decisions for us, and we have to explain ourselves to people. And I guess we're wanting to offer something where the power imbalance is a little bit different at Changes. So yeah, it's based in the idea that we're providing community for people, we're providing spaces for people where they can talk about their mental health with people who understand inherently what their experiences are. And the idea is that through community, people become connected with each other, they become more resilient, their self-esteem improves. And I think there's a lot of evidence that peer support is a slow burn, but it has a huge impact on people's lives. And I suppose the other things that make, I think, Changes Bristol a little bit different is that we're a completely free service. You don't need a diagnosis to use the service. Our groups are completely waitlist free. You don't need a referral to attend our groups or our befriending service, and there's no set number of sessions. So you can literally just rock up to a group, as many groups as you like in a week, as many as you need, and just talk with people who understand about what your experiences are and what's going on for you. And I know that my experience of accessing mental health services is that that's actually quite rare to have that much power and control over your own experience within a service and being able to have so much control over the direction of your own care. And I think that's something that peer support does really, really well.
Yeah, and I think that's, I don't know, it resonates with me a lot you say about like having like kind of that agency, I guess, to an extent over like where you go to get that support, how you do it, like, and how you undertake it. Because I think, especially in a lot of mental health situations, it can sometimes feel like that isn't an option. And also as like a queer person, to be like able to make all those decisions for yourself. Yeah, and also what you were saying about community and like having that space that is people like you. Yeah, I think 2020 has shown that so massively, that like queer family and queer community are so important.
So important. Yeah.
And like
so important.
It's so nice to see like a space that's created for queer people, like by queer people, for queer people, to support queer people.
Definitely. I completely agree with that. Like, chosen family is a huge theme in our community, and we've lost so much access to that over the past year. And some people will be in environments where they're not safe, or they've had to go back to hiding parts of themselves, and we've lost access to these spaces where we can recharge and celebrate ourselves. And I suppose with our LGBTQ plus group, that's what we're wanting to provide, is a space to recharge with our peers and talk about how we're feeling in a really honest and open way.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, like, how have you sort of adapted adapted to sort of the situation with the pandemic. I'm guessing like everything sort of moved to like Zoom and things like that. Like,
yeah, I wasn't actually working with Changes when they made the absolutely epic transition to having to work out how to do this in the middle of a pandemic. But our current situation is that we run 10 online groups every week. So there's one every weekday. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And they're all staffed by volunteers. We also run 5 in-person groups in South Bristol, and we are opening more up over the next couple of weeks. So we're opening one in St Paul's on next Friday, actually. And they are all socially distanced. We've got lots of safety measures in place. And we are allowed to do that under government guidelines, I should say that as well. So there's spaces for people who need to talk about what's going on for them, and maybe don't feel so comfortable or safe or can't be in spaces with other people. And there are also spaces for people who just need that human contact at the moment, and to be in rooms with other people. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, totally. I think if there's something that the pandemic has taught all of us, it's like, that need for like human connection, and that like, I love a Zoom party. I'm getting a little bit fed up of like, just putting my like blazer on and looking like great from the top, and then like having my pajama bottoms on from the bottom. But like, they're fine, love them. But like, having like that space where you can like interact with real life human beings. What a concept. What a concept. I was wondering, how did you get to Changes Bristol? Like, what was your journey to get there?
Excellent question. My journey has been quite long to get here with Changes Bristol, I think. So I've actually only been a project worker with them since January, and I was volunteering with the LGBTQ plus group, which was only set up in December, so it's still really, really, really new. But I used Changes groups as a member about 5 or 6 years ago, and actually it played a really big part in my own queer journey. Like, I remember kind of moments where, like, I remember specifically having just a really bad experience with a GP and trying to get like a referral to a gender identity clinic, and immediately having a Changes group to go to afterwards to talk about how horrible that was, and just being like met with this room full of people who were just wonderful and like listened to my experience and like really held a space for me to process that. And it's actually also the first space that I started using the name Jack outside of my kind of friendship group. So I trained as a facilitator, a group facilitator 3 years ago. And that was the first space that I felt comfortable and able to really, really bring myself. And I'm a big believer that there need to be more queer mental health practitioners. And
Agreed.
I think it's really important for so many reasons, and particularly in peer support. I think at the time I felt like I wasn't really seeing people running groups who looked like me and sounded like me and talked about the same things as me. So I realised that, I could just do that myself. So I did. And I think that's really important, being able to see ourselves reflected in the services around us and in the people around us.
Oh, I mean, 100%. It's funny saying, you saying, I wasn't sort of seeing that people were doing this. A friend of mine recently was saying, I've started seeing, and it's an online service based in America. I've started seeing specifically like a queer counselling service. And for some reason, until that moment, I hadn't realised that was even a thing. Like, I was like, there is like specialist counselling available for, people who particularly want to see a queer counsellor and, and help themselves through mental health issues in a queer context. I didn't even realise that was a thing. And the fact that someone who, I, without going into any sort of detail, I've been through a lot of various different mental health services, to the point of I can now parrot back word for word the confidentiality thing that, like, someone,
now that's a party trick.
That someone says, the fact that even someone with quite a deep awareness of, this sort of thing, didn't know that was really an option, or hadn't considered that was really an option, does speak volumes to how much more of this we need.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, like, as queer people, we experience this real, like, double dampening effect when it comes to talking about mental health, because we grow up in a society that tells us we're not allowed to talk about that. I suppose particularly in the UK, thinking about like growing up under Section 28, and still feeling the impacts of that now. You know, we grow up believing that we're not allowed to talk about the queer parts of ourselves. So of course, when we go into mental health systems and nobody's talking about it, it just feels really normal and natural and okay, when actually that's not the case at all. And that, I think, is really reflected in the same way that mental health stigma teaches us that we're not allowed to talk about mental health. So as queer people, we're carrying that like double load of like, actually we're not allowed to talk about these two separate parts of ourselves, which are so important and so intertwined with each other. So I think, spaces where we can bring our whole selves and talk about our mental health and our identity together are really, really important.
Yeah, totally. And like, just going back to when you were saying like using Jack as your name for the first time, like in a Changes Bristol group, like that super resonated with me as well, because when I first moved to Bristol, which was about 3 years ago, I was already out. I was like, cool, yeah, something's happening with my gender, don't know what, but I had gone to Off the Record, just to one of their hubs, which is like, you know, like an open doors kind of pop in for the evening. And it was the first time I'd met anyone else who identified as non-binary, who's now one of my best friends. And one of the workers there, you know, was trans, and it was the first time I sort of was able to experiment with what labels I wanted to use for myself, or like, you know, really learn more about like my queerness. And it was also how I accessed an LGBTQ plus therapist. Like, yeah, having those spaces, like no matter what organisation they're in, to like see people that look like you and to like feel like it's okay. Because I think, you know, I don't know, I personally feel like we're at a point where like, yeah, you can talk about queer stuff and you can talk about mental health, but like a lot of the time only if it's palatable, if it's like that sort of like mental health which, you know, can be made pretty in inverted, you know, and it's okay to talk about queerness in like certain respects, but to have those spaces where, you know, it's just like there were queer people there, or like, you know, a space where you can just openly talk about mental health. So powerful.
It's really nice hearing that you've had that experience. And yeah, I really have like a very visceral reaction to that sort of like that first time that you go somewhere and you talk about things that you maybe haven't talked about before, and just finding out that it's okay, how like surprising and what a relief that is. And I remember like making a phone call to the service manager of Changes years and years ago and saying, hey, like, I'm thinking about my gender, I'm thinking about using a different name. And I was terrified and I was shaking. And she was just like, oh yeah, that's fine. And I was just like, oh, that's not what I was expecting at all. But like, why wasn't I expecting that? And, you know, those are the messages that the world teaches us. And actually there are loads of really good organisations out there where you can bring all that stuff.
Yeah, but oh man, I just like that is also like so lovely, and this is kind of what I hope this podcast does as well. It's like help people realise that people have such similar experiences, or like you know, have experiences that may not be exactly the same as other queer people's, but like resonate. Like that really resonates. When I went to, you know, this hub and I was like, I use they them pronouns. They were like, cool. So does this person, and I was like, oh my god. Okay. And everyone was like, cool, yeah, Lowie, they, them. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And like, it genuinely makes me tear up now. And like, that's what, I don't know, just like other like queer people having similar experiences and like having that positive experience is just like, so lovely.
And this is the thing, like we, like on this podcast, we've spoken a lot about the importance of like queer joy. And, you know, even when you're talking about these spaces where people are sharing really difficult experiences with their mental health, there is still kind of this element of queer joy from it, because you leave this space, you know, at the end of a session feeling like, okay, I have been seen and I have been understood and I've been heard. And the joy in that, it's just this relief at knowing like, oh, someone has seen and understood my whole self. And creating spaces where people are seen and heard, and is such a valuable thing. And I think it's a thing that, you know, people from outside our community maybe don't necessarily understand the importance of, or almost like the rarity of, to a certain extent. I had a conversation with my partner. I was talking about a really positive experience I'd had at a doctor's quite recently. You know, and this doctor was really clearly making an effort to say, instead of saying, oh, ladies, you know, with these issues, saying like, oh, people, you know, I was sharing this experience with my partner, and he was saying, oh, you know, that's really, really wonderful, you know, that's, and then he paused and he just went, but like, that shouldn't be an unusual experience. Like, he's like, that's the baseline level of like kind of respect you should expect. He's like, that's what you should know you're going to get that going into this, you know, and creating a space for mental health where you know that that's what you're going to get every time is a really wonderful thing. You know that you're going to get people who are, you know, going to respect your identity and respect your experience. Like, that's a really wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's really, really put words to a lot of the experiences that I'm having running this group every Tuesday. The idea that people deserve that space and they know that they're going to get it every time. And we're finding that people are coming to the group and they're just kind of a bit like flabbergasted in this really beautiful way of like, oh, I've never had this experience before where I can talk about this stuff and it's okay. And also other people are having these experiences alongside me. It's such a beautiful thing. And yeah, there are a few evenings where I just nearly like tear up, because even though we're not in the same room as each other, you can just like really, really feel like the love and the just like deep respect and understanding for each other that is just has been so missing for our community in 2020.
Oh, just a little bit of queer joy.
Yeah.
You know? Just here for it.
Out of interest, I mean, forgive me if this is, you know, asking something beyond your scope. You know, you'll be sort of, you know, in contact with a lot of people who, you know, have various experiences of sort of, you know, like medical mental health services in Bristol. I mean, what's your kind of opinion on the current sort of state of that sort of in Bristol?
I mean, it's not great. It's a lot of, you know, yeah, there's a lot of cuts. People are on massive waiting lists. And yeah, the need is massively outweighing the what services are able to provide. And again, I think I already said about Changes groups not having a wait list, and I think it's such an important thing to have that instant access to a space where you can talk about how you're feeling, because it's so rare in Bristol.
Yeah. Oh man, and that's so nice. It's nice to know, like, and I hope that, you know, people listening to this can be like, oh cool, there's actually a place where I don't have to sit on a waiting list, or like I don't have to pay an extortionate fee. Love that. Like, so good.
This is the thing. I mean, even just knowing that this sort of stuff is there and ready for when you need it. I mean, I can feel it in my own like physicality now, just talking to you. I can feel almost like this weight kind of lifting, and to be honest, I can kind of hear it in Lowie's voice a little bit as well, like that sort of, that just knowing that, okay, like there's something here, we know, you know, there's something here and there's someone here. Have you know, actually there was one thing I was going to ask, just on a kind of on a personal note. We are coming up to sort of towards the end of this month, or beginning of next month, I believe, Autism Acceptance Week or month, I forget which. Do you have any, like, does Changes Bristol have any, like, particular services for, like, particular sort of groups of services for, you know, for autistic people, or even more particularly, like, queer autistic people? Because there's a lot of overlap there, like...
There is a lot of overlap there, you're completely right. And actually, as you've said that, I've realised that no, that's not something that we are currently providing, and that's probably not okay. So what I will do after this is get in touch with the service managers and let them know that, because I think something that I personally really love about Changes is that when the need for targeted groups is highlighted, we just open them. So we run a few targeted groups. So we run one for women, one for men, one for women of colour, and one for LGBTQ plus people, and they have come from people asking for them.
Wow.
And you're completely right that like spaces for autistic people, and particularly autistic people who are queer, because there is a big overlap. That's really important, and there's probably a massive need for that in Bristol. And I guess also know that you are so welcome to come to our groups if you are an autistic person. Yeah, we are very much based in just accepting people as they are, and non-judgment and inclusion for whoever you are and whatever you believe and however you are. You're very welcome to any of our groups.
That's really just hearing that is just huge love. Oh god,
this is like totally boosted my Friday, so I'm like hoping that everyone else hearing this is like, love this is the Friday like energy I'm here for.
Oh god, 100%. Just putting out this like this big queer love into the world, you know. Just, you know, big queer love into the world. That's what we're here to do, and that's what we like to do.
Yeah, and I really like that you've chosen to use the word love there, because I think that's exactly what we're trying to offer people, and I mean that in the least creepy way possible.
Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of Brené Brown. I won't go into huge detail because presumably she's going to be a future guest on the podcast, and maybe, I don't know. But she defines love as kind of really deeply seeing, understanding, and knowing someone, and the trust and respect that comes from that. And like, those are all words that we've kind of thrown around while we're talking about what's important in mental health and what we provide at Changes. And I think that's what community is all about. It's all about love.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think that's a really awesome point to end out on, actually. That's a really beautiful, lovely, uplifting thing, and we might need to wrap this up genuinely before I actually start crying.
Yeah, me too.
Just to sort of finish off, could you just kind of tell people how they can get to Changes Bristol and you know, in the queer group sort of within that, like...
So for our online groups and our befriending service, so that's a one-to-one phone service that we offer as well, you'll need to go on our website. Can we link this in the notes on the podcast?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you go on the website and then you just fill in a form, and then within 2 days somebody will give you a call and just explain the groups to you, and then you will receive a weekly email with all of the Zoom links on, and then you can go to as many of those groups as you like. With the in-person groups, you literally just turn up at them. You just go, and where they are and when they are all listed on the website. And yeah, you literally just rock up. You need to bring a mask with you and a bottle of water. And that, yeah, simple as that, really.
Awesome. Well,
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
so much. Thank you.
Seriously, thank you so much for coming on and chatting to us about this, and, you know, helping us to let people know about the awesome stuff that you're doing. Thank you.
Yay. Oh, thank you so much for bringing so much joy to my Friday afternoon. I genuinely might go and have a little wholesome, lovely cry and then carry on with my day.
The best type of cry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Huge up.
So the second piece we're going to talk about today is an awesome piece written by Kit, and it's an opinion piece on why Bristol should have a gender identity clinic. And yeah, it's a deeply important and incredibly eloquent piece on the subject. And yeah, it's just going to be really nice to like talk some more about it and go into some stuff that maybe wasn't said in the article, but you know, is equally as important.
I mean, I out and out say in this that trans healthcare in this country is in a crisis. That is not new information, that trans healthcare is in a crisis. Particularly in the South, put it this way, you know, trans people all over England, you know, are facing these like stupidly years-long waiting times. I mean, I did sort of say in the article, oh, you know, you're looking at 2 years. That's optimistic in terms of wait times. I mean, looking at, I believe I was on the page for the Nottingham clinic. Now, I don't know when the last time they updated this was. But they were saying they were now seeing people for first appointments that had been referred in April 2017. Yeah. It is horrifying. But most of the gender identity clinics they're quite clustered in the north. They're quite clustered in the north and in the Midlands. If you're, from Bristol, really you're looking at going down to Exeter, to the Laurels Clinic down in Exeter, or going to London. If you're under 18, you don't get a choice. You need to go to the clinic in London. That's the only place vaguely even in the south where they deal with, trans people under 18. And I really think Bristol would be like a really ideal location if the government were to open a new gender identity clinic. Now, that is an immensely big if. Like, if.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of reasons why Bristol would be a good place for it. Because, it's easy to... There's really good rail links, some of the best rail links outside of the capital on a practical level. You've got some really massive hospitals and teaching hospitals. Be really good to, access opinions from, like, specialised surgeons in, for top surgery or lower surgery. And it's pretty easily accessible by road for sort of a lot of Wiltshire and Somerset, Wiltshire is where I'm from originally. And it's one of those things where I could put forward a million arguments as to why Bristol would be a great place for it. But the fact is we know it's not going to happen. Really.
At least in the very near future under the government that we have.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, so it's just a really challenging situation to be in because, you can sit here as a trans person or a queer person and be like, oh, this is a massive issue. But also at the same time know that, like, we're living under a government that doesn't really care for queer or trans rights. And I think probably the most we can do is just continue to fight for it, to continue to fight to, have proper representation in the media of queer lives and trans lives, and continue to say that, trans healthcare and, to a similar extent queer healthcare and feeling safe in healthcare in general, isn't a crisis. Trans people, are waiting years to be seen, and there was a really beautiful mural painted on Stokes Croft in October about trans healthcare and the wait that is there, like, and there's some really scary facts, and the truth of the matter is people are dying because they can't access healthcare.
Yeah.
And it's really depressing. And I think it's also some of the reasons we're so keen to encourage people to fill in the census, because stuff like that will it will show that there are at least 600,000, probably maybe more, trans people in the UK, and that will, we hope, I don't know, it's somewhere in my heart, I hope that it will encourage the government or health officials or whatever to maybe do something, however unlikely that may be. There's a inkling of hope that maybe something would happen.
And you've reminded me of something. I actually saw... Okay, so the Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust, based in London, they process and deal with most of the trans young people in the country. There's this whole case going through the High Court appeal right now about their... basically, people are arguing that under 16s can't give informed consent to take puberty blockers. And the thing about it is these puberty blockers are literally life-saving drugs. And they are entirely, like, puberty blockers. Hormones, slightly different thing. But puberty blockers are entirely reversible. They are entirely reversible. They just put puberty on hold until, so that trans people don't have to go through a puberty that doesn't match their gender identity. And it's one of these things. And I read a tweet, and I cannot remember who this tweet was by. I do apologise. And the way it's worded, I do believe this is out of the UK, coming out of the UK, but it could also have been from America. But the point still stands. She was saying, like, oh, today I found out that, you know, cis kids get prescribed puberty blockers, like, just like that, over the counter. She was saying, you know, it turns out my younger sister, is going through early puberty. So, you know, they took her to the doctor, and the doctor was like, yeah, you're going through early puberty, here are puberty blockers. And she's like, I had to wait 3 years for my blockers, you know, where I'm trans. You know, it's this...
Although it was last year, I think the mural that was in Stokescroft was really excellent in highlighting that. Like, you know, it had parts of the mural said, like, we put our life on hold while we wait for vital treatment that lets us begin to live. And we already have to become our own advocates and experts to fight hate crime, gatekeeping, gaslighting, billionaires, bigots and bureaucracy. We don't want special treatment, we just don't want to die waiting. And I think that's a lot of what gender identity clinics and, you know, generally trans healthcare boils down to. It's like, we want to save people's lives. Trans healthcare and gender identity clinics won't do anything bad. They are literally there to save lives. And, you know, if a child goes on puberty blockers and realizes that, you know, they aren't trans, which, you know, is a massive minority, but, you know, if that is the case, then no harm has been done. They have, you know, been supported through whatever they've been going through, and they have come out the other side with no ill effects of it. And the same thing, you know, is for gender identity clinics and for trans healthcare for adults. You know, it's a life-saving treatment. It might not appear to it from, you know, a cis point of view, but it is, like, you know, and just a content warning for suicide. I'm going to talk about that really quickly, but not in depth. You know, 45% of young trans people attempt suicide. And, like, having a gender identity clinic and improving trans healthcare will improve that statistic, and it will mean that you lose less lives. Like, we've already lost so many people through, you know, crises, and, like, for example, the HIV and AIDS crisis, and, like, through laws that have killed us, and now we're, like, getting there with, you know, gay rights. But we're still a long way off with trans rights, and we're still losing trans people. It's a crisis, and having gender identity clinics and better trans healthcare will save lives and, you know, let more people live the life that they want to live.
Yeah, 100%. And also, the problems come further because accessing a gender identity clinic and, like, medicalised healthcare is one of the requirements of changing your gender marker under the current Gender Recognition Act, which, again, for one thing, neither myself or Lowie will be recognised under that act. That's not something we can do because they don't recognise non-binary genders. There's no, you know, you're an M or you're an F, you know, it's... But then you get issues where, you know, people are waiting for healthcare and then they're waiting to change their documentation because you have to go through one process before the other. And also, people justify putting roadblocks in the way of trans healthcare and trans medical care, saying, like, oh, what if people, like, change their minds if they access it too quickly? First of all, that is a very, very small, like, a ridiculously tiny minority of people. Secondly, coming on from that, isn't it better that there's one person out of, you know, however many million, you know, 1,000 or million trans people accessing care? Isn't it better that there's one person who regrets it than thousands of people who are unable to access it? Like, it's, you're talking about a situation which very rarely happens.
Yeah.
And using that as an excuse to restrict access for, you know, and not fund and roll back on laws, you know, it is really frustrating. And that's the problem. And there are so many problems within this. You know, it's just, we need more trans healthcare, and we need...
Yeah.
And like I say, yeah, you mentioned the census. I hope that there is a part of me that really, really hopes that the numbers we currently have on trans people, I really hope, and I kind of think they probably are, I really hope that they are grossly underestimating the number of trans people. I hope that this census comes back and it's like, actually, there's like 1 million trans people in this country, because that is going to force the government to acknowledge, like, there's a whole lot more of us than you're willing to accept.
Yeah. And I think, like, we talk about all these, like, issues through a lens of, like, we need gender identity and some better trans healthcare. And I think, like, that massively goes into a bigger picture of, we need a government that cares for us. We need a media that doesn't paint us as evil. We need, like, laws to protect us. Like, it's one piece of a massive, like, bigotry pie.
Yeah.
Like, it's, like, obviously it's one issue out of so many, but, like, to even, like, be speaking about trans healthcare and gender identity clinics, and, like, knowing that, you know, we have maybe like half an hour, 40 minutes to talk about it, and I'm like, I could talk about this for like years probably and still not run out of things to say.
Yeah.
And that's one part of like a trans life. Like, I cannot like verbalize enough how like exhausting it is to be a trans person.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like, oh my god, there are so many other things that we could be focusing on, but sure, paint us as the evil ones and like don't give us healthcare and like don't protect us because we're just that scary. Like,
well, this is the other thing. You know, people say, oh, you know, you make everything about being trans. You make everything about being, you know, queer and non-binary. Yeah, because we kind of have to. If you just, you know, treated us like human beings, if you just treated us like human beings and, you know, didn't restrict our access to healthcare, like, we wouldn't have to be screaming about this all the time. And there's a line from a poem by Neil Hilborn. I have completely forgotten the title of the poem. I will pop it in the description when I remember it. But there's a line in a poem which is, you know, what's more punk than living despite everything that has tried to make you not. You know, and that's kind of the existence that like trans people are living right now, because I don't know, I just want to be seen as a goddamn human being worthy of, you know, worthy of government love and respect, like, you know? Yeah.
But that's why, like having a podcast with like, you know, speaking with another queer trans person, and also like to know that in Bristol and beyond they have this queer family that like everything is so rubbish. I'm not trying to make light of a rubbish, really awful situation, but like to have those like people around me that understand me, and to be able to like hear from other people that are going through the same absolute rubbish that I am. You know, we are as trans people and queer people is like the one small mercy of a really, really awful situation. Yeah. Is to have those people that see me and love me. And queer family generally. I don't know. Like, queers are great. I love queers. Yeah. They're the best.
Definitely over the past sort of couple of months, I have really realised just how much queer community means to me. Like, and just how much that, like, sustains, you know, sustains and, you know, and sustains and makes things doable, makes things survivable, frankly. Survivable, frankly. And, you know, we find the joy in what we have, and I'm really trying to find a way to end this on a positive, like, because although this is a really serious thing and like a really deadly thing, I think it is straight up deadly. Like, we're not gonna sugarcoat that. You know, it's that thing that's what's more punk rock than living despite everything that's tried to make you not, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I just want to say to anyone out there, any queer person, any trans person that is struggling, like, obviously go and get help. You know, go to the mental health services. We'll put all the links in the description.
100%.
But like, you have a queer family that's here for you.
Yeah, we love you.
We love you. And yeah, nothing is more punk rock than living.
Yeah.
So to all the queers out there, keep being punk rock.
Yeah.
And you won't be long again, I don't think, until all queer people can be together and be all punk rock in the same room.
Yeah. Like I say, just keep doing that, and we love you. So yeah, this has been the Bristol 24/7 Queer Catch Up. My name is Kit Ross.
And my name is Lowie Trevina.
And we will see you in 2 weeks. It's been lovely having you, and yeah, we love you, queer fam.
Lots of love.